The meta-analysis part is just using a lot of data, not only one article to answer a question, and extract the color data and try to first of all find the threshold for when meat is no longer acceptable.
Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform dedicated to sharing breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the meats industry. On each episode, we will hear from meat specialists and professionals to talk about numerous topics in meat science. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation, the National Provisioner, UltraSource, the new standard for innovation,
IFA, Meat Processing Power.
Viscofan is a global leader and innovative partner in the food industry who provides solutions for the casing market.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. My name is Francisco Najar, and I'm your host today. Dr. Bass, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here as usual, Francisco. And you know what? I'm your host today because we're going to trim things. And yeah, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. So folks that have been listening to the MeatsPad podcast since its inception, since this brainchild of Francisco's came to be in existence, some of you may have noticed that it started out as Francisco Najar graduate student, and now it is Dr. Francisco Najar. You received your PhD, your doctorate in meat science, about a year ago, maybe. It was probably about a year ago. Yeah. Okay. Right. And one of the big topics that you were working on was something called a meta-analysis, and it was a meta-analysis about meat color. So we want to talk about that today because the paper is now published, and we need to digest what it is, because this is kind of a big deal, but digest it down to so that the majority of folks can kind of understand what this meta-analysis is. So first, Francisco, I want to ask you about this. First, what is a meta-analysis?
Yeah. Well, let me back up a little bit. Don't
be too technical about it.
No, I won't be too technical about it. But I just want to start off by saying what meta-analysis is, but also why you did it. So back in when I was finishing up my master's, I did an internship. I did the privilege in Dr. Hauser. Well, he was still in K-State. Helped me to get an internship with Hy-Vee. And for some of you guys may know who Hy-Vee is, but they're up in the Midwest.
Midwest grocery chain.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a big grocery chain. Has presence in Missouri, Kansas, Iowa. They're from Iowa. Anyway, so I always been very conscious on food waste, and more particularly in my case, meat waste. And this all came up because I as an undergrad, I had the privilege to go to Ireland as an undergrad and living by myself for 1 year there. And I saw some of the, like in Europe, they're somehow more ahead of us, ahead of a lot of people from the sustainability standpoint. I like the episode with Jennifer. We touched on animal health and some sustainability and how we have to utilize the entire animal and that stuff. But anyway, so I wanted to study some of the means to help retailers to understand the color stability of meat, fresh meat, and the things that they get in a way of a loin, a vacuum package, strip loin. When they cut it at the store, technically, I mean, they're gonna display it aerobically. And just going back, just very quick, in France, when I was there, I saw, like, even if they throw away a pound of produce, a pound of food, you get a fine. Like, it was at that time was like 7,000 euro fine for just throwing away food. They have to give it away. In the United States, a little bit different because you have a lot of the liability issues. So a lot of stores, they don't. A lot of stores, they just throw it away. But one of the main factors that I found at this internship, and because I studied like how much they throw away and why they throw it away. And almost like 70% of the meat that was thrown away was because it started to discolor on the surface. You have all that discoloration or oxidation, the methylglobin appearing on the surface. And people, it's not attractive anymore to the consumer. So they start to discount it. And sometimes even if they discount it, they don't sell it and they have to throw it away. So, but I really wanted to study that 70% and understanding some of the factors that affect that stability. One of the big major factors is post-mortem aging time. When we talk about post-mortem aging time, well, it's a little bit of technical, but it's the time after the animal is being harvested. And typically in states, you have from 7 days to up to 90, 100 days of aging time, which we're talking here about wet aging. And this is always a misconception. We talk about aging. So a lot of folks, oh, are you wet aging or dry aging? No, we're talking about wet aging in the bag. So vacuum package, keeping the product fresh, keeping the product under refrigerated temperatures. And so we talk about a lot about the aging and how the enzymes they work to get to make meat more tender. Anyway, so they have this time, and every week that he passes, we have less color stability on the meat after it's caught and displayed. For many factors that we're not going to touch on some of the mitochondrial activity and NADH, but this is a fact. So the more you age the product, the less color stability. So, and that's data. There's a lot of papers, a lot of data saying that the more you age it, the less time. We call it color life or color shelf life. We mentioned technically just talking about the color on the product. You're not talking about quality. You're not talking about food safety. We're talking mainly about color life of the product. Yeah,
the appearance.
So I visited with Dr. Hunt. Everyone knows who Dr. Hunt is, and we started looking at some papers that he did back in the 90s, early 2000s, and yeah, so we ran some statistics to see, just the effect of post-mortem aging time or harvest time on color of fresh meat. And yeah, so we have this trend. So the meta-analysis part is just using a lot of data, not only one article to answer a question, and extract the color data and try to first of all find the threshold for when meat is no longer acceptable, and after that we got that threshold, that borderline threshold for color life, and then we apply it to several post-mortem aging times, and we actually wanted to see a little table to come up with a table of some information for that it's easy to understand, just to understand the impact of post-mortem time. I think this was this was a lot of information, but this basically it.
So, and to boil that down a little bit, so first off, there was the inception of the idea of where we have food waste, and food waste is a big topic right now in the meat sciences and the meat industry, and for processors out there. Not only is it costly as far as dollar amount, but it's costly as far as public perception. We don't want to be wasting what this animal has provided for us. It's the right thing to do. So beyond that, Francisco had taken it upon himself to look into what does the data say as far as the greater meat science community has reported on as far as aging time and color stability once the meat is cut and displayed. And so I did a quick count here. So what you looked at was over 30 research papers. Now, folks out there, A research paper is a whole project, and sometimes that takes over a year to do. It's a lot of resources, but that's what the academic community does, is to spend that time really digging into the information that the science is telling us. So Francisco looked at over 30. Francisco and his team looked at over 30 research papers, which means 30 different research projects. The power of a meta-analysis over just a single snapshot of a research project. The power of meta-analysis is looking at over many years and many
data points.
Yeah, many different research projects. And so you did the meta-analysis, which means you looked at all of this massive amount of research. What'd you find?
So, and you mentioned 30 research, and I wish it was 30, because it ended up being, I think, over 100, like the entire papers from 2000 to 2020. But you cannot use all the papers. You have to read them. You have to understand the data. I mean, when you talk about color, there's certain things that, I mean, you got to look at temperature of display. You got to look at the luminant, which is the luminant is, we got to record objectively color measurements. There's many colorimeters, which I mean, you can call it that way. This is the unit of the machine that objectively assess the color of meat. So there's a lot of them.
For folks that are out there listening and not familiar with a colorimeter, if you've ever gone to a paint store and you brought in a sample of a color that you want them to use, they can use essentially a colorimeter that takes a snapshot of that, and it will mix the paint color that you want, but it has to measure the color objectively. And that's kind of what we do in the meat sciences. We have a variety of different colorimeter type readings that can be used, and different lighting sources, and et cetera, et cetera. So you had to boil that down from just how it was measured, okay, to steak thickness, pH, temperature, the different lighting types on the meat itself, right? So was it fluorescent? Was it LED? Was it just natural lighting, etc.?
Since 1883, Ultrasource has been a trusted supplier to the food industry. Ultrasource provides superior kill floor, processing, packaging, and labeling equipment and operational supplies.
Taking a lot of data, but you at the same time, you're trying to boil down the papers that use similar conditions. So the answer is a more accurate and more concrete answer, and not. Even the animals, even the genetics and the feed. A lot of these papers were done in the States. If you start thinking about animals that are beef that is finished in Ireland or New Zealand, in a different diet, it won't have the same color results.
Different factors.
So that's why I ended up with only 30 papers, because there were a lot of out there, but just to meet my search criteria, have to boil it down so it makes sense when you run all the statistical procedure. Another big one was within colorimeters, you have different illuminants. You have illuminant A, you have illuminant C, and it all depends on the research team and as to which illuminant you're trying to use. You look at the color guidelines by MSA, they recommend using illuminant A because it focuses more on the red of things. So if you don't do a lot of color research, I mean, you're not going to understand all this stuff. It's a little bit technical, but just understand that there's some conditions that you have to meet to make this applicable and make it representative to the data.
Okay, so what did you find after isolating it from hundreds of papers down to 30 some individual projects? What were some of the findings that are important and relevant to our processing and retail listeners?
So I'm actually here looking at the paper, but the table that I really wanted to come up with, and after visiting with the statistician, and I needed something simple for retailers that not necessarily understand a lot of meat science and meat color, but I needed something simple so they can understand that the time after harvest. So we found that we're talking about strip loin, and that's another thing. You have to look into the muscle.
Which muscle specifically, right?
Right. Yeah, you cannot compare strip loin, which is a more like glycolytic muscle, to, let's say, just taking into account more I don't know, something from the chuck,
from the oxidative muscles, right? Yeah. So the tenderloin. Yep.
Correct. So you have to pick a muscle and use that muscle throughout the whole study to compare apples to apples. Correct. So in this study, we used the strip loin, the longissimus lumborum muscle, and the psoas major, the tenderloin. And it's funny because these muscles also, they were the most used in the literature.
A lot
of scientists, a lot of research papers, when you're trying to look at color stability or other treatments, they go and study or evaluate the longissimus lumborum, the strip loin. It's probably one, I don't know, something that it's well used in the industry and also in the literature.
Well, and it's a high value item that's very consistent for the processors out there. The strip loin it's pretty much one muscle. Yes, if you get to the more posterior sirloin end, you get to that vein end, but for the most part, it's a single muscle. And for research, you want to put your emphasis on the most impactful, and then the least variable. And so it makes sense to look at very impactful tenderloin and strip loin.
Yeah. And just going back to your question on what we found, under the conditions we follow on that criteria, we found that between 0 to 21 days after harvest, those first 21 days after the animal has been harvested, cut into or separated from the animal into loins, onto smaller pieces, you keep that strip loin vacuum packaged for 21 days or up to 21 days, you're going to expect up to 7 days of color shelf life. That meaning that the first 21 days, you get the most out of the product from the color stability standpoint. Here's the opportunity. When we go past the 21 days, we start seeing a more like a color stability issue when it comes to the timeline. So we go to after 21 days, specifically 22 to 28 days, we go from 7 to 5 days of shelf life. And as you continue, the days of color life of the product after it's been cut and displayed it becomes less and less. Here's the opportunity. When we always talk about aging, we talk about we need to age this product for a long time because it's going to be more tender, but we need to find the baseline from, and I think we spoke with your colleague, Dr. Coley at Idaho,
Dr. Michael
about
Coley.
this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Michael Coley. Yep. So yeah, you need to get a product that is tender, a very high quality product, but also you want to be able to sell that and get the most out of that product in terms of color. So, and I think that's something to consider. And I made an example on my dissertation, on my defense. Let's say you're a retailer, you are in that world that, I mean, I purchase, procure a lot of meat, and then I display it. I have my meat shop. It's good to understand, like, the more you age it, the less time of color life you're gonna have. So, and maybe there's some strategies for those folks that are saying, okay, I'm buying one truck of strip loins that already, just to put an example, already 14 days of aging, which is good, first quality good. You need to just start thinking about, okay, so one truck, so how many pallets, how many boxes, and start thinking your logistics. Once it gets to your warehouse, and once you distribute that product to all the retail stores, and once that product is sold, I mean, it can pass another 15, 20 days. I mean, you don't know, but it could be to that extent. So it's important to understand if you know that you may gonna have product that is aged that long, maybe start thinking about other strategies. Maybe you send it to the restaurant to cook it. Maybe you can use it in a different market, so you don't display it, and you don't lose any money by having to discount it, or by having to do something else with it. I don't know. That's it. I just wanted to have this as a more like a conscious, making people more aware of what they procure, so they can understand what to expect. It's more like a preventive. And when you had this conversation with Jennifer recently, we talk about preventive.
Yeah, and talk about preventative health for livestock, and prevention is so much less expensive than trying to heal, than the cure, right? And so if we can prevent a circumstance, a challenge, and obtain an opportunity instead, then we can find that. And so to kind of recap a little bit of what you're saying is that if we know how much age is already on some product, we need to just be able to balance the age of the product with how much time we need to sell that. And so if you're saying, if we get a good buy on some product that has a long age on it, say we're getting into the 35-day age range of some strip loins, but we got it for about 20 cents less than everything else. We just have to know that we can't overcut. We don't want to cut more steaks than what we can sell in, say, a 3-day range, because if we cut too many, now they're starting to discolor, and now we have to shrink. Yeah. And God forbid we have to throw it out. Right.
Yeah. And the other strategy on that is maybe you can cut, but you can vacuum package, but it's going back to the consumer. Well, maybe you vacuum package it, like the consumer is not, I mean, sometimes they don't like that purple color of that steak. And we visited about how other countries in South America, they started using vacuum packaging to extend the shelf life of the product, but also the color. But
and vacuum packaging makes a lot of sense for our really small operators that maybe have a retail outlet and possibly even sell a lot of product frozen. But for those who have a fresh case, it's not an option, right? So that's where you have to consider how much age is on that product. Aging is a good thing, by the way, just to remind everyone. Aging beef is a good thing because it improves tenderness and palatability. But like you're saying, what you found in the meta-analysis, and what Dr. Michael Culley also has found, my colleague, who you reference on page number 1 of your meta-analysis, by the way, which is really cool to see that, is that the longer you age product, the less stable the color is going to be. And so you just have to manage that. If you want really long shelf life, you have to compromise with greener product, as we would say. If you want really super palatable, long aged, super tender product, you have to understand that you can't cut too much ahead of time because it's going to discolor quickly.
Yeah, because ultimately the consumer buys through their eyes.
Yep, they see with their eyes first.
Even if it's tender, well, if it doesn't have a good color, being aware of that and just have a good balance. And I think that was the main objective of this paper. We can do it in other muscles too. Mm-hmm. And that's the plan, to start working with other muscles and possibly other species as well, to looking at the impact of post-mortem imaging time on color stability. But yeah, so
we'll go ahead and wrap this up pretty soon, but I do want to ask real quick, because you've already mentioned that we can go down the rabbit hole of, well, what if we consider this factor? So finishing, nutrition factor. What if we consider all the different muscles and those kinds of factors? So can you just real quick talk to the audience a little bit about other factors, ante-mortem factors especially, that are going to affect meat color that maybe weren't necessarily able to be addressed in this particular paper, and just a real quick listing.
Yeah. So we can talk about, you mentioned genetics. We can talk about diet. An example, especially for American beef that is exported to everywhere. This is a good information so that the people that are buying understand what to expect. And again, a lot of it, sometimes they get frozen product, and then you get to other factors there. Because I mean, you think about Asia, sometimes like up to 14, 20 days of transportation. And then you can talk about other things like stress, right? Managing with DFD and that type of thing. But we didn't focus a lot on that for this matter. We just focused solely trying to take into account post-mortem aging.
So, well, and some of the things that you called out specifically in the paper in under phase 2 was age of the animal. Okay. Sex of the animal, genetics you've already mentioned. Nutrition is huge, right? Were those animals grain or concentrate? We can't just say grain, because we don't feed everyone grain up here in the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes we feed potato byproducts, and that's not grain, but we feed a concentrate of some sort that results in a similar fat. So nutrition is a big deal. And then you've mentioned also, as we've already said a couple times, just muscle differences, right?
Yep.
And differences of that. So
yeah, and going back to your point to animal age, and I think in the United States, a lot of the animal that is harvested will be less than 30 months, but a lot of them will be between 20, 22 months of age. Muscle type, and the thing about some of the opportunities for muscle types and where it comes from the animal is not a lot of the muscles having heavily studied, like the strip loin or like the tenderloin. You look at a lot of the papers when they evaluate collar stability, they focus on these two. So it's hard to start looking at other muscles because you may not find enough data to support a meta-analysis study.
Well, and for our academic listeners out there, that's opportunity, guys. We need to know more about the tri-tip from my home country, California, where tri-tip is king. We need to know more about the briskets, so that consistency and color for the Texans and those in the Kansas City area are just having that much more of a consistent, saleable experience for the customers. Pull through demand. So ultimately, this is just the beginning of opening up an enormous can of worms, but that's a good thing in a really good way, because you need those worms for some pretty good fishing later on. And so, it's so I encourage folks out there to take a look, even if you're not an academic, take a look at the journal Meat and Muscle Biology. This is the official journal of the American Meat Science Association, and that is where Dr. Francisco Najar's paper is published, along with a number of other papers of yours as well, Francisco. And we can go down those roads at another time. But any other thoughts on this particular study?
Well, just another thought. I know we mentioned and we talk about aging a lot in this like in this episode and in previous episodes, but it's good to know that there's also another side of the coin, that is the impact of aging on color stability. And it's good to know that some of the opportunities for all that meat with it's good to know. It's a simple practice. It's good to know when you procure meat, go to the side of the box and look at the packaging time, look at and where it's coming from. And I think it's a good practice to have. I know I do it all the time. I try to see, okay, this meat came from where, and when was the animal harvested? Oh, and I think and that was probably me. I don't know if you Dr. Bass, if you do all that.
Oh, box end panels. And honestly, Francisco, let's go ahead and document this right here in front of the world and everyone. We need to talk about box end panels and the vast amount of information that's on the ends of those boxes. But that's for another day and time. So, all right. But all that information, good to know. Good to know where products coming from. Definitely good to know the time in which it was packed, so that you can manage that particular product in your individual operation. So, anyway.
Thank you.
This has been fun.
It's good. It's good. Good stuff. So,
all right.
You guys have any questions? So email us at info@meatspad.com. and we address all the questions from you, and we're happy to continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.